Greetings, Gilliam the Rogue here once again with an Elder Scrolls discussion video. Today we're going to be talking about Magicka build changes in the Summerset patch. So again, a lot has changed, very much like the stamina sets or stamina builds in this patch. There's been a lot of rebalancing directly and indirectly with them. So first we'll talk about the application or availability of sets. As a Magicka build, there's a lot of diversity now because two-handed weapons, which are staves, count as double set bonuses, so we have a lot of power. We're always able to run 2 5-pieces and a monster set now. Some of them will still run a 5-piece, 2-piece, like a monster set, a 3-piece, and then an asylum staff or something like that. We'll talk about that in a bit. We've also seen a huge increase to light and heavy attack damage with staves. This really helps out Magicka DPS. They're doing really well right now, arguably better than stamina in a lot of situations, especially on high mobility fights like Cloud Rest or Asylum Sanctorum. They're doing really well there. They have safety, they have damage shields, they have range DPS. They're just really strong right now, and a lot of that is because of light and heavy attack damage. So this means that if you're not comfortable weaving just yet, you're not going to see a lot of this power, but luckily heavy attacks have been increased in terms of damage production for Magicka, so that lightning heavy attack build that you can make with like Infal or something like that is doing relatively okay, but light attack DPS is through the roof right now, so definitely understand weaving as soon as you can. Fit in those light attacks between ability. But in terms of sets, there's a lot of diversity. I will be having guides on my new website published on June 5th that will have a lot of that stuff in there, and it changes based on your class. So sets like Master Architect work really good on the Magicka Nightblade, the Magicka Templar, and the Magicka Warden, classes who have very cheap ultimates. We have you're still always going to do great DPS with Juliano, so if you're a beginner player, that's always going to work well. Otherwise, Burning Spellweave generally will outperform that now with the double Inferno meta because of light and heavy or light attack damage being so good now. If you are using a light attack rotation, you're going to use double Inferno. Then you're going to be wanting to use Burning Spellweave. It's really strong. Even if it has a less uptime to give you a little bit less weapon or spell damage than Julianos, it procs a unique form of burning, which does crazy good DPS. So Burning Spellweave, really good. If you do use it, you're generally going to run jewelry and a staff, or 3 armor pieces and a staff, because you can retain the bonus even if you bar swap off. The Maelstrom Staff is still going to be ideal on your back bar. However, if you do not have access to it, I would suggest using Burning Spellweave active on both bars. However, that does mean having to get a staff. That might be pretty difficult. Otherwise, again, you can stick with Julianos. Otherwise, the new set Sororia that drops from Cloud Rest Trial is really good. The best Magicka DPS set in the game, assuming you can sit inside of it. So the way that it works is you place a little circle on the ground and it lasts for 10 seconds. And then when you stand in it, you get a buff that lasts for 5 seconds, meaning the circle lasts for 10, the buff lasts for 5, and it stacks up to 20 times. You get a lot of spell damage out of this. But if you leave the circle for more than 5 seconds, you'll lose all of it. So this means that you're playing a mini game pretty much when you're doing your rotation and fighting a boss. You have to constantly go in and out of this circle to avoid damage, or if it's a low mobility fight, you can just sit there and reap the benefits of free DPS. So it's a pretty nice set. It is going to be usable in every situation, but there will be a learning curve with it, because if you place it in a bad situation, like the World Shaper or something like that in Sanctum Ophidia, and you're trying to get your stacks back and you run in and die, well, you now do even less DPS. So it won't work for everyone, but it can work once you get used to it. But it's a really strong set. Again, there's a perfected and a non-perfected version. The only difference between them is the 5-piece on the perfected version has an additional line of max Magicka. This is roughly 1,000 to 2,000 DPS in a raid environment. Very strong, but it is not the end of the world. If you do not have the perfected version, it is still a very good set. Non-perfect drops in normal, perfect drops in veteran, +0, +1, +2, and +3. Weapons drop in +0, armor drops in +1 and +2, and then jewelry only comes from +3 from perfected, and then you can only get jewelry +3 on normal as well. So jewelry is pretty hard to get. You're always going to want this to be active. So either 5 jewelry or 5 armor or 3 jewelry and 2 armor. Never on your staff, because you're going to be wanting to use that Maelstrom staff, unless you want to run like 3 jewelry and 2 staves, but that would not be ideal. Otherwise, Mechanical Acuity is still a really strong set if you are using Force Pulse. If your build has a lot of direct damage, which like classes like the Magicka Sorcerer have a lot of direct damage because they're using Force Pulse still. Really good. It even works on the Magicka Nightblade if you are also using Force Pulse. I've gotten really good DPS with it. The difference between that and the other set that I'll be talking about is very small. But if your class does not have a lot of direct damage like a Magicka Templar or something of the sort, and you're not using Force Pulse, then you're going to be using a new set, and not new, but we're going to be going back to Mother's Sorrow. You can still have this active on your staff, but if you are using this set, you want to try and remain on your front bar at least 60% of the fight. So if you're on your back bar more than your front bar, do not run Mother's Sorrow. Run a different set like Burning Spellweave instead, because this crit bonus is only active on the 5-piece. You're getting a lot of crit out of it. It's very much like the stamina version of Yokeda, Advancing Yokeda. They work very much the same. You want to be on your front bar as much as you can to reap the benefits of this set. Otherwise, again, if you're using Force Pulse or you have a lot of direct damage, or you don't want to necessarily go get a new set of gold gear, Mechanical Acuity still does very well. Otherwise, pretty much not anything changing with our monster sets. Zans for single target if you're melee. Otherwise, if you're ranged, use Valken. If you're a Sork and you have fire and lightning damage, you can still use a Lambris. Otherwise, Grothar for AoE. Those are your 4 main monster set choices: Zans, Grothar, Valken, or Lambris. Choose at your discretion. In terms of traits, we're going to be wanting to do 3 Arcane on pretty much every single class, because that is really good for your DPS, because Magicka builds have more amps to their Magicka pool because Inner Light, class passives, stuff like that, as well as the fact that Arcane gives you Magicka, which gives you more damage shield size as a Sork or anyone using Harness Magicka, which means you will be really tanky, and if you're using Harness, get more resource management. It also indirectly gives you resource management from the Undaunted Metal passive or Command passive. Very strong. Better than Infused on Magicka builds because they just have more amps to Magicka. If you are really good, or if you are doing content that you're familiar with, you want to put 1 Bloodthirsty on your jewelry trait. However, the difference between 1 Bloodthirsty and 1 Arcane is quite small. Unless you're really good, then you'll see probably about a 300 to 500 DPS difference on it. If you're doing a target dummy, it'll look bigger because target dummies are very important to cheese your execute to get high DPS. They're not a good baseline to compare. I was testing triple Bloodthirsty on Magblade. It can beat triple Arcane by a nice amount, but on a target dummy, in a raid environment, it does not. Triple Arcane or 2 Arcane, 1 Bloodthirsty is much better for those situations. In terms of the rebalances of light and heavy attacks, this means that Magicka is more important, and it has such changed the re-importance of traits. So if you are running the Lover Mundus Stone, you will still stick with 7 Divines. However, Magicka builds have access to a lot of penetration in a raid environment where they have things like Alkosh, Torrigs, Major Breach, Minor Breach, and stuff like that. They do not need the Lover Mundus Stone, so they will be using the Apprentice Mundus Stone instead. And with that, if you are running the Apprentice, you will always have Infused on your big pieces and Divines on your small pieces, because that extra Magicka will give you a tiny little bit more DPS. We are talking a very small amount. So if you don't want to retrait, you don't want to spend your precious transmute stones, or you don't want to have to go grind new gear, don't worry about it. The DPS difference is very small. We are talking less than 1% DPS difference, but it is better. So that's pretty much everything. We're still using Infused on both staves. You can use Nirnhoned if you're doing a lot of AoE damage, but Flame Staff, or we're using Flame Staff if we're doing a lot of single target damage. We're going to use a Lightning Staff if we're doing a lot of AoE damage. In terms of spammables, a lot of us have now gained the access. If you either are using class abilities or not, you can use Force Pulse. Still does really good. The best range damage spammable in the game in terms of raw damage production and group utility. However, if you have access to the Summerset patch, there is a much cheaper alternative called Elemental Weapon. It does a little bit less DPS, but it gives you tremendous sustain potential because it costs much less. However, you need to know how to perfectly weave in order to gain access or the power out of this skill. So if you aren't comfortable weaving and you're only doing heavy attacks, you cannot use ability, but it is also very, very nice. It does have a little bit of group utility, but it's going to be a tiny bit less than Force Pulse or Crushing Shock. Comparatively, again, Force Pulse is better if you can sustain it, but if you cannot, then Elemental is better. But Elemental Weapon also gives you Psijic Order passives, which might help your tankiness with getting Concentrated Barrier and so on. So there's a lot of utility between them. If you're a Magicka Nightblade, Funnel is still really good for healing. Force Pulse is the best for raw damage. Otherwise, Elemental Weapon is the best for sustain. Templar Jabs is the best if you're still melee. However, if you're ranged, you can still go with Elemental Weapon or Force Pulse. If you are running a Sorcerer or Templar class and you're trying to play from a ranged, I would still probably suggest running the Asylum Staff if your group does not have very high uptimes of Burning, Chilled, and Concussed. This will help your group's DPS tremendously with keeping up Concuss very, very high with the Asylum Staff. If you do take that route, you're going to run 5-piece Auroria or Burning Spellweave or Julie, or if you're like a Pet Sork, you'll use Necropotence or something. Still going to run a monster set like Zans or Grothar. However, if you're ranged, you're probably going to be using Valken or Alambris. Then you're going to be running 3 Willpower, not anything else, because Willpower is a little bit better because it's just going to have that flat stats. You can increase them. It will beat out Minor Slayer unless your class is the Magicka Nightblade, who has an Execute, which scales better with Minor Slayer. Then you will be using that Asylum Staff on your front bar and a Maelstrom Staff on your back bar. So I hope that has helped in terms of figuring out how to gear out your Magicka characters for the Summerset patch. Really, really strong now. Much better than they were before. Very, very fun. Lots of DPS. Great group utility. Really, really good in a solid place. So hope this has helped. But I'll see you guys around. As always, a massive shout out to these phenomenal people who help me stay afloat financially in and out of game, help me give feedback, test videos, donate stuff to me in game. I really appreciate all of the support. Make sure to check out the links in the description if you're interested in doing such. It's never necessary, but I really do appreciate it. But until next time, I'll see you guys around.